Bronx Democrat Andy King threw a bizarre tantrum at City Hall this week after news that he has been suspended from City Council. In a recent video, I mentioned how King was a huge supporter of failed presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, even during the primaries. Mayor Bill de Blasio, who was a close ally of Andy King, is now trying to distance himself from his fellow Democrat, calling on King to resign. During this strange 15-minute long rant by the Bronx Democrat, he tried to frame himself as the victim. King sat quietly as his colleagues criticized his behavior, then delivered a rambling 15-minute monologue explaining that he was unfairly being crucified by council members as the worst person on the planet and an oppressor of his staff. Then, as he left City Hall after the vote, he said, "The only thing that I'm guilty of was being too nice." Despite being exposed for threatening and harassing his own staff not to cooperate with investigators, he even compromised one of his own employees' medical treatment in retaliation for talking to investigators. King was also caught making unwelcome advances on his own staff members before this current investigation against him. At the same time that King was preying on his own female staffers, he enabled his wife to essentially help run the office, according to the report, overseeing hiring of favored candidates, including people she'd worked with at the union. A new ethics report also gave more details on how Andy King and his wife used city funds for a retreat to the Virgin Islands just as his wife's daughter was getting married there. King also physically threatened people in his own office. King, quote, allowed his office to become unsafe and disorderly by condoning the conduct of a supervisor who repeatedly physically threatened persons in the office. And yet, despite all of this, Mr. King is claiming to reporters that the only thing that he's guilty of is being too nice. So it looks like there may still be more consequences to come for Andy King. People are probably wondering what is going to happen next with Andy King, but for now he has been temporarily suspended from City Council and has received a $15,000 fine. For now, though, it looks like he has survived a vote to expel him completely from the council. This prompts the question, just what do you have to do to get kicked off the City Council? Councilman Andy King, a Bronx Democrat, seems committed to finding out. Last week, this 48-page report was issued by the City Council's Ethics Committee. Investigators found evidence that Mr. King violated New York City's anti-harassment policy and used council funds to plan a retreat in the Virgin Islands at the same time as the wedding of his wife's daughter. Mr. King not only refused to cooperate with the investigations into his conduct, but he also actively sought to thwart them by threatening and firing members of his staff who he believed were cooperating. Quote, "This is the most egregious thing I have ever seen in my 6 years in the City Council," said Corey Johnson, the council speaker. Went on to say, "Retaliation, a culture of fear, potential misappropriation of council resources, all of these things, and not cooperating with the City Council all along, which shows total disregard for our process." By a 44-1 vote, the council agreed on Monday to suspend Mr. King for 30 days without pay, fine him $15,000, and appoint a monitor to oversee his office for the remainder of his term. The penalties take effect immediately. A motion to expel Mr. King for his actions was introduced by a Queens Democrat, but was defeated by a vote of 34-12. Susan Lerner, the executive director of Common Cause New York, a good government group, says that Mr. King's conduct should be examined by criminal authorities. Quote, I hope there would be an independent investigation by criminal authorities to determine whether there was criminal activity or not, Ms. Lerner said, adding that Mr. King's conduct justified expulsion from the city council. Quote, the council does not believe he has the ability to behave appropriately, so to ask the taxpayers to pay for a babysitter is inappropriate. If I as a taxpayer would pay for anything, it's a new election. Talking more about this taxpayer-funded retreat that Mr. King took in 2017, Mr. King arranged for reimbursements for staff members to attend an annual retreat that he and his wife, Neva Shillingford King, hosted on St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands for the Black, Latino, and Asian caucus and labor leaders, according to the council report. The wedding of Miss Shillingford King's daughter was part of the official retreat itinerary, and Mr. King also allowed his staff to do work to promote Miss Shillingford King, an executive vice president at the Service Employees International Union, and improperly gave her authority over his staff, the report says. They also talk more about these separate occasions where Mr. King held 2 meetings at his home where he demanded to know which staff members were cooperating with the various investigations he was facing. When some admitted that they had spoken with investigators, Mr. King retaliated. In July, he sent one member home and ordered that individual to wait for a call before returning to work. The staff member whose email access was terminated waited at home for 5 weeks, too fearful of losing their job to speak to anyone from Mr. King's office or from the council's legal and human resources staff. In August, when the Ethics Committee voted to open a disciplinary matter against Mr. King, he sent another staff member home and terminated that person's email access. In September, Mr. King tried to fire the 2 employees, claiming that the purpose was staff reorganization. Looks like Andy King is still trying to do everything he can not to cooperate with this investigation. He and his attorneys say that they are planning to sue over this ethics probe. Over the weekend, before this first set of penalties against King was announced on Monday, King was first asking for his colleagues to vote against a set of disciplinary measures that were being recommended in response to the probe. King said, what I'm going through, what my family is going through, is just not fair, King said, calling the last 3 months a period of personal turmoil and touting his record of service in the community. He said, we're being mistreated, we're being treated like we are some type of criminal, and that's far from who I am as a person. There is an ongoing argument between King's attorney and the special counsel leading the investigation. Pamela Hayes, King's attorney, argues that the council member did not have adequate time to mount a defense and was being unfairly portrayed as uncooperative, a qualm that will be the central premise of an Article 78 lawsuit that they plan to file. I will give you an old-fashioned saying that most litigation people use. If they don't get it right, we'll see them in court, she said, indicating that the legal salvo will be designed to hold up the disciplinary process until a judge can examine what took place. Hayes, King's attorney, for example, said the special counsel and the committee refused to reschedule meetings if King and his lawyers had conflicts, and in one instance, when the lawmaker was set to meet with investigators, they were kept waiting for 3 hours before being told that the committee and special counsel were not coming. I have not been able to give my side of the story that is in this document, King said, adding that he was not told of a closed-door meeting with council members this week to discuss the case. Something is wrong with that process. However, the committee wrote in its report that King's lawyers had been aware of the investigation for months and were given ample time to prepare for a closed-door hearing, which was scheduled nearly 3 weeks after a set of updated charges were announced on August 21st. In fact, Cohen and the committee argued the lawmakers' attorneys had deliberately avoided coming in to create the impression that King was being deprived of his due process rights. Quote, council member King's attorneys engaged in a pattern of dilatory and non-responsive behavior designed to delay the hearing indefinitely and frustrate the council's disciplinary process, as well as a calculated attempt to lay a foundation to make the false allegations of denial of due process. Is this leading to criminal charges? That's one of the big next things to look for here. Johnson said last week that the standard for expulsion would likely need to involve criminal charges by an outside enforcement body, similar to the felony charges that automatically removed former council member Reuben Wills from office in 2017. Reuben Wills, another New York Democrat councilman, was also found guilty in 2017 of stealing more than $30,000 in public funds that were meant for charity and campaign expenditures. So what is going to happen next with Andy King? I will continue to follow this and any related stories, anything else going on. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you could leave a like on this video, that is greatly appreciated. And make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Thanks everybody that has been sharing these videos and sharing the channel to help get this information out there. Also, all supporters at patreon.com/realityreader and paypal.me/realityreader. Thanks again for supporting the channel. I'll follow up soon. Thanks.